2024 and 1 day to go until Election Day. The candidates, of course, making their final pitch to the nation.
An eviction notice back in October.
Now to vote 2024 and 1 day to go until Election Day. The candidates, of course, making their final pitch to the nation as they barnstorm through the battleground states.
Over the weekend, Vice President Harris focused on the must-win state of Pennsylvania. Former President Trump hit 3 states, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, and Michigan.
Early voting across the country coming to an end now. More than 78 million Americans have already cast their ballots. Joining us now with more on the state of the race is ABC News senior reporter Katherine Faulders. Katherine, thank you so much for joining us, I believe, from Palm Beach on this Monday morning. We are just 1 day away. We're in the final stretch here. So I want to know, what are your key takeaways on how both of these campaigns are handling these final hours? I know they're focusing on the battleground states, but taking a slightly different approach.
Yeah, definitely a slightly different approach, but as you mentioned here, we are in the final hours, and I think the reality is that this race is really a toss-up. Both campaign sources close to the campaigns would say behind the scenes that they're cautiously optimistic. The Harris campaign, of course, is still saying that they feel like they're the underdog here. Sources close to Trump that I've spoken to essentially say that they are confident, but the reality is that it's cautious optimism, at least coming from them. Now, some close to Trump, some of his advisors would say that they would wish that he wouldn't be making some of the comments that he's been making in this final stretch as it relates to that violent rhetoric, if you will, that we've been hearing from him. But he is still focusing in terms of his messaging on immigration and the economy, 2 issues that he's really led with among his supporters, frankly. It's not clear if those issues and the focus on those issues will draw in any of those undecided voters, any of those independent voters who are all so crucial to this election. We'll have to see. Now, of course, Harris is on the campaign trail with that message of unity, that she will bring the country together. She's using her rallies, has been at least, to focus on the things that Trump has said, particularly as it relates to violence, but a little bit of a different strategy we saw from her, at least yesterday, where in her rally she didn't even mention Trump by name. So we'll wait to see what we hear from both of these candidates today. They are in those all 2 critical states, those battleground states, as they really go into these final 24 hours.
Speaking of those comments that he made, the escalation of his rhetoric, inciting violence on the press and his opponents, how is that playing out with his base, and how is that impacting swing voters?
You know, it's really hard to tell, and even in the polling in the final days, the reality is the polling hasn't moved. Now, of course, those comments, at least that he made at the rally, some of his supporters cheered in response to them, but it's just going to be impossible and hard to tell how that plays at the end of the day with voters, with those independent voters. Now, of course, with that rhetoric that we talk about, Harris has wanted to tell her supporters that, spotlight what he is saying in the hopes that maybe it has an effect on some of these voters who haven't made a decision, but still, we haven't seen any direct correlation to what he's saying and how that's swaying polling this close to the election.
Katherine, let's talk about just the huge numbers of early voting. I mean, we're talking about 77 million people have already voted. Pennsylvania, one of these key states that will be looking to perhaps swing it one way or the other, and they can't even start counting those early votes until the polls close tomorrow. What do you make of the sheer number of people that have already voted ahead of Election Day tomorrow?
Yeah, so the early voting is just so fascinating for lots of reasons. Now, the data on it, we can tell a little bit from it, who's voting, how many Republicans have voted, Democrats have voted, but there's a huge portion of that early vote that don't have any party affiliation, and we can't tell exactly how they are voting. That is something that we will learn on Election Day, as you know, when they start counting the vote. But the reality is here that it has been a record turnout of early votes. People are going to the polls early, but still half the country needs to vote. So when the candidates are out on the campaign trail today, they're still trying to pull in some of those undecided voters who possibly haven't voted yet. But the early vote numbers, we'll learn more about when, of course, the ballots start being counted on Tuesday.
It's a lively Palm Beach there.
Yes.
All the sights and sounds as we head into Election Day tomorrow. Katherine, always great to see you. ABC News senior reporter Katherine Faulders from Florida.
Straight ahead, a family trip turned into a prolonged nightmare after they left items in the back of their rideshare. All of it seemed lost until they got 7 on Your Side to help.